What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 1 of the Lightning Lab podcast. We are the co-founders of Lightning Lab. I'm Jake Ollinger. This is Kyle Wilcox. We're going to go over our background, playing careers, how we started training together, why we train the way we do, some of our biggest mistakes we've made while training, and we're just going to get into it so you guys can find out a little bit about ourselves. So, Kyle, you want to give your background first?
Yeah, I can do that. I guess we'll start in high school, Newtown High School in Connecticut. I was a center fielder and pitcher, obviously. Always had a good arm. Felt like I was a better center fielder and hitter than I was a pitcher for quite a while. You kind of get turned into a pitcher once you have the arm that people see that can really, develop at the next level. So that's kind of what took me there. And that was, I guess, around my sophomore year of high school when I realized that was probably going to be my path to play at the next level. Still hit and everything up through senior year, and played a significant role on our team, which I loved, being a part of both sides of the field and just feeling like you're really into the game. Whereas pitching, it felt like it was weird because you do it and then you're done with it. And I thought that was weird as a basketball player where you're in the game, you're just part of the game the whole time. But anyway, threw hard, walked a lot of guys, struck out a lot of guys, kind of the way I had, I was my whole career, just a good athlete, throwing hard. Didn't really learn a breaking ball until my senior year. I started throwing kind of a sweepy slider, but I would really drop my arm angle. So it was sharp, but it wasn't something that was going to work against better hitters that could, see those differences. But yeah, pretty good high school pitcher. Went to Bryant. Didn't play a whole lot my freshman year. I was just not prepared for that level of baseball. I was like most guys going to the next level, you're not good enough. You're not prepared for that. And that's normal. It pissed me off that I wasn't good enough. And that's what drove, a series of adjustments and a work ethic that, drove me to improve on a daily basis by watching the guys on my team that were really good, and figuring out how I could be better and improve. And so I did improve. That summer I went to Newport, played in the NECBL, pitched really well, was throwing really hard, fixed some mechanical things, got a little stronger, was just kind of went through that normal process you go through when you're adapting to a new level of baseball. Was kind of a draft prospect for the next couple of years and ended up being drafted in the 6th round by the Seattle Mariners. And I played with them from 2015 to 2021. This is tough because there's so much along the way, but we're just, I guess, going to give a brief overview here. And then from there, I was with the Atlanta Braves for 2 seasons. And then after that, I was with the Colorado Rockies for part of a season this past year. So that's a kind of a bird's eye view of everything.
So I also went to Newtown High School, which is pretty interesting. Kyle and I never played with each other. He was a senior when I was in 8th grade. Was not a very good high school baseball player at all. Grew a lot from my sophomore to junior year and was just pretty uncoordinated. I pretty much only hit it this time. I pitched a little bit my senior year, but I was actually second baseman, 6'3" second baseman as a junior in high school. Not a very good one. And then I played center field the year after that. Same thing as Kyle. Went to college. I went to Babson College for 4 years, and I own a college for 1. Went to Babson. Did not play well my freshman year. Really struggled and just was not ready mentally for that. I feel like college was one of the best times because I grew up a lot in college, and it was just something that I needed to go through a struggle like that to really progress. So went there just to play the outfield and did really poorly my freshman year. Similarly to Kyle, I didn't play in the NECBL, but went to a summer league, around local summer league.
I can't imagine not struggling freshman year. I know it happens, but it's...
Yeah, 100%. If you're a freshman and you go to college, you should probably have a tough time unless you're just that guy. Yeah. But played in a local summer league, won the MVP of the league, came back, and I had a ton of confidence going into that second year, and I was way better prepared mentally to go into that season. Did pretty well. Next year, we went to the World Series, played even better. And then COVID was my senior year, so we only got to play a couple games. We played well. And then I went to Iona College for my 5th year. This is kind of when I started pitching. During COVID, I built kind of like a backyard baseball setup. And mostly it was for me to start hitting live ABs against my buddies who were willing to come out. But it ended up starting to throw bullpens, realized I could throw pretty hard. So I started that process of becoming a two-way. I was going to Iona to play the outfield initially. Went there, really kind of went all in on pitching and just struggled hitting. I did not perform there well at all. And then after that, when that season ended, I decided I was going to try and throw as hard as I possibly could. Trained as hard as I possibly could with that for a couple of years now, and then I'm currently recovering from a rotator cuff tear, and we'll see where that leads us. But that's pretty much the background for me, overview.
Fun.
Yeah, wild. I always knew I was going to get into pitching too, because when I was in college, I was a pretty good hitter, but when you're at a D3 school, you know you're not probably going to get drafted as a hitter, no matter how good you are. Like, you play against other kids that are really good too, and they're not getting picked up. So you kind of have
tough.
a feeling.
The hitter route is very tough. Pitchers, I mean, you flash a 96, 97, and no matter where you're at, people know who you are.
Yeah. Kyle actually really demoralized my hitting career when we were doing backyard baseball, because I faced him in live at bats and he would throw an inning and I would strike out 3 times every single time almost. And that was when I
take great pride in that. I didn't want Jake to keep wasting his time, and I showed him what it looked like to face a good pitcher.
Yeah, and that's when I knew I probably wouldn't be able to play professional baseball as a hitter. But I was throwing about as hard as Kyle was at that time, so I was like, you know what, maybe I could give this a try. So that'll I think we should talk about how we started training together, because that's pretty interesting how that happened.
Yeah, so I think, well, there's a couple situations that I can recall. One was at Newtown High School.
When was that?
I think it was a random day. We were both there. You were probably hitting or something, and I was like throwing. I was maybe throwing with Rich.
Yeah.
But more so, what I recall was I needed to pull down one day at the Newtown Youth Academy, NYA. It's a little workout facility in Newtown. And I needed to pull down. I think it was probably
December.
Yeah, December.
Or 2019.
Yeah, I needed to know how hard I was throwing, and I was like asking my friends like who's got a radar gun or whatever, and then I guess someone mentioned Jake Ollinger, and so I texted him and we met at the NYA. I pulled down, probably throwing pus.
Well, there's a funny part of that story too.
Yeah, what's the funny part?
Rich texted me, who's your buddy,
yeah.
And he texted me and he's like, Kyle wants to pull down. I was like, perfect, I want to too. Like, let's do it. And I remember asking him, I was like, how hard do you think he's going to pull down? Because, like, obviously I wanted to throw harder than you that day. And he said he's going to break the sound barrier. And I was like, oh man, like, you might throw 108. Like, I don't really know, because I only knew you as a good athlete at that time.
I think it was probably 94, maybe 95.
I think you threw 95 that day. But you were doing shuffles, and then I was an outfielder at the time, so I was very good at pull downs. Those were what I was using to test my velocity. And I remember you were doing like 2 shuffles, and when you're an outfielder, you're kind of just good at throwing the ball without really being warmed up. So I played catch, and I was juiced up because, like, in my head, I'm competing with a pro athlete here, and I'm just some D3 kid. And I was like, why don't you try doing this? And I kind of went through my whole big run up, and I pulled down my first one at 99. And then I think you kind of realized that I wasn't a scrub at that point. So then I ended up pulling down 101 that day, but I only one shuffled 95. So we did tie on that. But I remember that day when we went upstairs to work out after.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, go for it.
Jake, well, we were working out upstairs, and I went over to Jake, and I'm like, dude, like, why are you hitting? Like, oh, dude, well, my coach is telling me, you know, I can't pitch or whatever. And I'm like, I don't care about your coach.
By the way, I love my college coach. He was one of the best baseball people ever in my life. When I committed, I was on the same page with him of not pitching.
He's great.
Yeah, he was amazing.
But from my perspective, Jake, you have this arm. You need to go do this if you like want to try and keep playing baseball. If that's like what you want to do. And I think you maybe like that was the first time you really considered it.
Yeah, I mean, I had it in my head because I knew I threw hard, but I was throwing like 90 off the mound at this 91, I think.
Yeah.
And I knew I could throw harder. I just didn't know how. So yeah, when you said that, it was like very much a good sign of encouragement for me to like, you know what, like let's do it.
Yeah, that was cool. And I also realized that like my pull downs were terrible, and I needed to fix my something, which turned out to be like mostly footwork, so that I could actually transfer the momentum and everything that I was, getting from my shuffling into my throw. That took a while to figure out, but anyway.
Yeah, so then the whole COVID thing happened and everything got shut down. Like I said, I built a little facility in my backyard. I had a batting cage. My buddy and I, we built a mound just out of bricks, and we bought, I think it was 3 cubic tons of clay is how they measure it.
It's a good mound.
Just, yeah, solid mound. We built it all by hand, eyeballed it. All we did was measure the rubber, which is like a road stop or something. And when that happened, I was like, well, maybe Kyle will want to come and hang out and train because, like, what else is he doing? So I sent him a text, showed up, starts throwing. Like, he was throwing once a week at this point, pretty much at my house.
Yeah, I
what
was
else
ramping
doing,
up
but
from, so I was in, this was COVID spring training, so I had a teres minor strain that I was ramping up from, and I had no idea what was going to happen with the season, whether I was going to have to go like pitch in a game in like 2 weeks or if I was not going to play at all. But like my goal during COVID was I need to throw 100. There's no reason for me to not be throwing 100. Between the athleticism and like the arm ability, like it was driving me nuts. I couldn't figure out why I was throwing just as hard or slower than people that were less athletically talented than I was, to be honest. And so that kind of started a huge mechanical and workout journey, training journey from there that Jake has been, a part of the whole time. But yeah, essentially during that point I was ramping up, and my mission was to throw 100 during COVID because what else was I going to do? The Mariners had also told me at that point, like, you're fine, but we see you as an up and down guy. You need to add some velocity, and then you will be, in this category of the organization where, you'd be a strong consideration for the bullpen. So I needed to do that at all costs. And that's where that kind of all started.
You want to talk about the time you threw the hardest you ever thrown?
Yeah, hardest I ever threw was with the pitching doc. I had someone from the Mariners there watching. This was during COVID still. The doc had helped me out with a lot of mechanical stuff, a lot of like perspective on training techniques and like different ways to look at throwing in general that I'd never really been exposed to in my career. And I thought that was extremely helpful and refreshing to not just hear the normal stuff that I would always hear. So very impactful time in my baseball career and my throwing journey. I learned a lot of good things there. But anyway, we're in the backyard with a Mariners guy, and yeah, I knew that all the work I had put in during COVID was kind of like going to come out that day. It was like all leading up to it. I was feeling really good about where my mechanics were. I just felt great about everything, and I was like just so ready, and obviously very pumped up. Like I had a lot of adrenaline that morning. I just knew exactly what my mission was. I did not care about my target, to be honest with you. It was, hey, you guys told me to throw harder, and I'm going to show you that I'm doing that, and I've exceeded your expectations in that regard. And so we went to, Jake was there. We went over to the park to play some like infield catch, just kind of get loose and get going a little bit. Got back to the house where the pitching doc has his, had his setup with the bullpen and everything. Get the shoes on, do a couple more warm-ups, and
I also threw first, so you were sitting for like a half hour at this point.
Yeah, I was just like ready.
Yeah,
my brain, I was just ready.
Mm-hmm.
Threw the shoes on, pulled down. First one comes out 102. Like, I'm feeling really good, really loose, really fast, really pissed off. That's a good combination if you want to throw gas. And so, yeah, I knew that was going to be a good day. And I pulled down a couple more times, ramped it up a couple more, and I think the last one was like 106. And that was just, it was just everything I had, you know. So that was great. But then I got on the mound and I was like 99, 100, 101, 100, 101, and then my last pitch was 102. Probably would have hit a righty in the back of the head, maybe.
Might have missed him, actually.
Might have missed him.
Yeah.
So that's good. No one on base.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was gas. It was me feeling focused, energized, great about my mechanics, and free to put every single thing in my being into that throw. And I did that, and it came out really hard. Yeah, it was a cool day.
Yeah, that was electric. I remember watching his first pull down, and I saw the doc's expression, and he said something about 2, and I was like, was that only 92? And because it looked like he didn't try at all, and then it was 102. I was like, oh man, he might throw 110.
It was a good day. And then since then, I'd hit. So I got Tommy John. Oh, here, comment. Go ahead, Tommy John. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we got broken arms. It's all right.
You guys throw 69. Anyway, Tommy John came a month or 2 after that. But I mean, related but unrelated. I did some dumb training scheduling type things.
We'll get into that another time.
with my throwing intensity. But anyway, after that, I've thrown 101 multiple times after the fact. So it came back. And then Jake, what about you?
Well, I'll talk about mine, but this is our first podcast and we're filming on a phone, so I want to make sure we're still rolling before we. All right, we're good.
You could also cut that out potentially if you know how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll just keep going. Honestly, whatever. First episode, we'll keep it going. So time I threw the hardest I've thrown off the mound was 97.4. It was very interesting because I had thrown 94 my last bullpen. Pretty much every fastball is 93, 94, and I was like, man, I put everything into that and it was only 93, 94. And I had thrown up to 96 at this time, and I was like, what can I do to throw harder? So the night before that bullpen, I actually wasn't even sure I was going to throw because I couldn't find anybody to come to the field with me that day. And I was like, if I can't have anyone hold the radar gun, I might as well just wait another day. So that night, I actually have a screenshot of this. I texted one of my buddies, Backman, because this is the kid that was who I was training with at this time, and I texted him at 1:30 something a.m. or 1:20 something a.m. and I said I could throw 97 right now, which was wild because I hadn't done that before.
That's what's also wild about that is that that's how it goes. You can feel that you can do it before. I don't know where it comes from, but you can you can do something, and then you definitely can do it if you feel that.
100%. So I mean, let's be clear. I probably said something like that, maybe 1 or 2 other times.
Yeah, but how much did you believe it?
I very much did. It was it was interesting. So that night, what I did was I went back and I was looking at every piece of training information that I've been given, pretty much ever, going through. I have a album on my phone of everybody who throws hard in the MLB, essentially. Screen recordings of 100-mile-an-hour throws, pretty much, probably almost all of them. And I was watching those and I was going back and looking at all this stuff. And I think an interesting thing about training that I found is sometimes you do something and you're just not ready to execute it yet. And it can be the right thing, but you don't know how to do it yet. So you try it and you're like, well, that doesn't work. So what I did was I went back and I had become a much better athlete in this time, much more aware of my body. I was more mobile, moving better. So I went back and I looked at literally everything. I probably spent 3 hours just studying all this stuff I could. Sent that message, go to bed, wake up the next day, and I had a lesson in the morning. So I did the lesson and I couldn't find anybody to throw with me. I remember everybody was gone. It looked like it was about to rain. I call up one of my other buddies who I didn't even know was in town I thought he was busy this time. I hadn't seen him in probably a couple months at this point. Call him up. I'm like, hey, you want to hold the gun? I need to throw today. And he's like, sure. Show up to the field and there's geese everywhere, like maybe 100 geese surrounding the mound. And I was like, oh my God, this is a disaster. So at this point during the summer, I wasn't really warming up. I would just show up and kind of start throwing. And I remember I showed up this day and I felt really good for whatever reason. Made probably 15, 20 throws and catch and got on the mound. And normally when I got on the mound, I'd be like right around 80. And my first throw was 86. And I was like, that felt really good. Next throw was 88. And I'm someone, I mean, you've seen me throw a ton of pens. I like to go up like 1 mile an hour at a time generally. 88, 91. And I was like, wow, that was really good. And then I threw 94 the next one. And that was something I hadn't done that easily ever in my life. And I was like, okay, like I'm about to throw really hard. Next pitch was 97.4. It's actually, I actually don't have that on video. Like I have the throw, I have the throw, but the radar gun didn't get in at 97.4.
It's a beautiful throw. It's the best one. It's the best throw that Jake has ever made in his life.
Still to this day.
There was a ton of work that went into that day over the previous months.
Yeah.
Many months. We were trying to get, I mean, a lot of stuff, but the biggest difference in that throw versus anyone you've ever made is how well your back leg works, where you get into that nice like hip load, hip hinge, whatever you want to call it, and you don't leave it. You don't leave it towards third base.
Yes.
You don't leave it towards home. You are just hinged and like stable, and then your hips rotate right from that position.
And it's interesting because all the months leading up to it, I was like very focused on trying to hinge correctly. And then I stopped focusing on it and I started doing it better because of some certain things. So that day when I was trying to throw hard, I was trying to like, we always talk about gather. And like, you always talked about gathering energy through your leg lift. That was the first time I ever felt that. And then I was just trying to stay, we learned this from the doc, trying to stay over the rubber and keeping like my front side over the rubber as long as I could.
Have you ever considered drifting?
Don't drift, guys. Do not drift.
Imagine if you drifted.
Yeah,
it would have
might have been 105. But no, all summer I was probably doing what you would call drifting, and it was 90 to 92 pretty much every time. Some days a little bit harder. And I could try not that hard and it would be 90 to 92, and I could try as hard as I wanted and it would be 90 to 92. And it doesn't even feel remotely similar. I posted something once and a kid was like, oh, I have guys go from 80 to 90 all the time, like 91 to 97 is not as big of a jump. And I'm like, well, yeah, mathematically it's That's 6 ridiculous. Miles an hour, but there's so many ways to throw 90 miles an hour, like especially for really good athletes in general, like there's a lot of ways to throw at least 90 miles an hour.
If you're a young player and your goal is to get you to 90, you can do that.
Yes.
It's in you.
For sure. But there's not a lot of ways to throw really hard. Like the energy transfer has to be almost perfect. And that's what I felt that day. And the crazy part was I couldn't have had less adrenaline that day. Like I was not sure I was going to throw. I was just there, like felt like it was going to rain. It was chasing off the geese, but everything just worked perfectly that day, throwing wise in my mechanics.
Paul Nyman has an interesting formula or take on why that's so difficult. He kind of like represents it in mathematical or like physics terms, where he tells you that it takes like double the amount of energy or something to get from, at a certain point to get like another unit of output. And so it basically reinforces and explains that like adding after a certain point, like a 95 or like the higher you go from there, is exponentially more difficult than like the earlier velocity gains. So it's very true.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the biggest thing in throwing harder was figuring out how to set myself up in a good position to just let my athleticism be on display from there. So like, it's all about like how I move initially. If I mess that up, everything gets messed up. And then just some little feelings that I have when I throw the ball well compared to not throwing the ball well. But it's not something that I like, I'm trying so hard to do this certain thing. But when you understand what's good and what's not, you could kind of be aware of like, oh, I did that really well. And you're good at fixing it, just because you're aware of it, instead of like having to try super hard to fix it. But the biggest thing is figuring out how to use your body to the best of your athleticism without I was trying to force movements for so long, and that's when I threw the slowest and everything was terrible. So if you're trying to get better mechanically, you got to figure out how to use your athleticism and just more so let it happen than trying to force yourself to be here or there or whatever. And
for sure, I think it's useful to like understand what's supposed to happen in the throw and have like kind of a picture in your mind of like what your body should be doing. But yeah, it's never about if I get here or get there, this will happen. That's not how it's not like inputs into an outcome. That's not how movement works, especially complex, like high velocity movements. It's all just like everything impacts the next thing.
Yeah. And it's also the training. I feel like a lot of it, like it's way easier to throw hard when you're a better, more explosive, faster, more mobile athlete.
Yep.
So
it requires all of those things. Fluidity, strength, speed, coordination, every part of being an athlete comes into play to throw hard.
For sure. So what do you think your biggest training mistakes were?
I mean,
I know a big one for me, if you want me to start off.
Yeah, go ahead.
Biggest thing for me was trying to throw the ball as hard as possible with no target in mind. I mean,
So you're saying throwing stuff too, baseball related things as well?
Yeah. For throwing wise, I mean, like the biggest mistake I made was trying to throw the ball as hard as I could with no target, because the biggest problem for me once I got on the mound was because I had not really when I went to Iona and I was supposed to be pitching in games, I think I threw to a catcher maybe 2 or 3 times the whole winter because I didn't know. I threw to hitters 1 time. So that was like 1 time since last time in high school. And then when I finally did throw to hitters, the first few times I was just not confident in where the ball was going. So I couldn't let myself unleash the ball knowing that it could kill a teammate of mine. You know what I mean? So it took me a while to get comfortable doing that. And then I would go through phases where I was comfortable and then phases where I wasn't. But for me, the best I ever was throwing was the last winter before you went to the Braves.
Me too.
And what was it? That was 2020.
Going into 23.
Going into 23. I mean, we were so locked in on throwing the ball hard to a target. And our bullpens were all about throwing the ball hard to a target. And then we would face hitters and we would throw the ball hard to a target. And we would play catch and we would have competitions of throwing the ball
every single day
to a target every single day.
I would throw a 120 pitch touch and feels.
I'd be standing in and
I would hit them a couple times. Like we just did it. We accepted, like I knew at that point, like that's what's holding me back. The stuff is electric. I need to command the ball better. So I really went to work at it, and Jake did as well, and it helped us both a ton.
Yeah, and I mean that winter we threw so well the whole time. We were throwing strikes. Like we pretty much weren't walking guys at all. I think we might have walked guys 1 guy each our first outing that we threw that winter. We probably threw, I think I threw like 7 innings. You probably threw close to 20.
Yeah.
And then after that, I think we might have walked 1 or 2 guys combined. And it was just, it was awesome. We were just so locked in on it and like understanding that that's what matters. Like that's what it's about to be good in a game. Like, yes, throwing hard is important and we train that. And we weren't throwing slow, obviously. We were still trying to throw the ball hard, just really focusing more so on the target. And then when we had the hitters in the box all the time, that was taking care of the adrenaline. But we were throwing bullpens. We were trying to throw the ball hard, but my shoulder was completely torn.
I was also really good that off season. I knew the velocity was there. I'd just come back from Tommy John. I was 96 to 100, and so I knew that was there, and I knew it was going to be there because my workouts and the training were all taken care of. I just needed my mechanics to be in a particular spot that I needed them. You know, I needed to feel the fluidity. I needed to feel certain things about my throw that we'll probably get into at some point. But I knew if that were there, you put me in a game, like I'm going to be throwing 97 to 100. I know it. So like if I went and threw live and I was 92, 94, or like if I threw a bullpen and I was like 87 to 90, I was not worried about it. I wasn't going to muscle up and try and get more just because I'm concerned about the number in this bullpen in November or December. I knew that I was doing the right stuff where that would be there.
Yeah.
And I was more focused on the feeling of my delivery and hammering the strike zone.
And I was throwing pretty much the same speed you were, so I was I was pretty confident. I was like, I'm going to throw pretty hard when I get on a dirt mound and whatnot. So that gave me some good reassurance too.
Yeah.
At that, I mean, you threw a little bit harder a couple of days, but a lot of times.
Yeah, well, towards the end of it, once it was close to spring training, I was like 94, 96, and I could pull back a 97 if I needed. And then I got to spring training, and I was 96, 99. I didn't walk many guys in spring training. I got the first 10 innings of my season, I didn't walk a guy. And it's all like very much so because of the preparation that we had and like how good of an off season we put together with like just such disciplined focus on targets and catch command and just being like locked in and competitive about throwing the ball where we wanted to.
And it's interesting too, because it really shifted, because if our old conversations were all about how do we throw the ball hard, and that was good, obviously it's important to throw the ball hard, but then it was all how do we become good in games. So like now when we talk, especially like your last year, felt like every conversation we had baseball related was about mental skills, or like how do you approach this on the mound, like how do you go about when you throw a bad pitch, like to come back and make a good one. All these little mental things that we were working on or trying to get better at. And I think that's like, once you are capable of being a good pitcher, that's the most important stuff. It's like once you have all this stuff, it's the thing that separates you is your mentality on the mound and how good you are at actually pitching. Like
executing. How often can you execute the pitch you want to throw? You of course need like good stuff. That doesn't always mean like throwing 97. That helps. Duh. But like I've played with so many guys that don't throw as hard as I do, and they're in the major leagues. I'm not. Why? Because they execute a lot more pitches than I do on a consistent basis. That's literally what it's all about once you're at the AAA major league level, is execution.
100%. I mean, I didn't get there, but same thing with me. Is just like I had all the stuff to be a good pitcher and I was working on it, but I just wasn't actually good at pitching because I hadn't trained it as much.
That's right. You didn't have the reps.
Yeah.
And this ties right in. Like I guess you asked one of my biggest training regrets. I have a few that I'll mention, I guess, quickly. But one of the bigger ones is not taking that command stuff seriously way earlier. Like high school, like sure, it's hard. You didn't know. I didn't know. You
just want to strike guys out.
I was just playing. But college, I probably should have put my ego aside of like knowing I was probably going to get drafted and being like, how do I improve? Like, where do I improve? Like that was something that I saw from Karinchak when he was coming up with me. Like that guy didn't care how good he was as a freshman. He wanted to improve. He wanted to be the best. And I had that in me, but I would suppress it because I would convince myself that like, oh, like I'm already like really good. I'm the best. Not the best, but like I'm already really good. And so that took away from my ability to focus on what I needed to improve at. And if I had really locked in on commanding the ball throughout college, early in my pro career, when I needed to, my career probably would have looked very different. But I never was able to look in the mirror and say, why are you not commanding the ball better? Why are you not throwing more strikes? And it's because I never was truthful with myself and said, because I am not like skilled at this right now. Just as if I were to go try and learn the guitar, I would need to practice and I would suck and I would practice and I would suck and I would practice and then you'd get better. I never was like willing to be vulnerable enough to practice something I sucked at. And so that's a huge regret. I mean, I don't know if it's a regret, but it's something I would have done differently. And I recommend every young player get ahead of that. The other things are like mechanical, like use your legs. Like that screwed me a lot of times. Like stay closed screwed me because of how I interpreted it. Like trying to throw with tense body parts. Like
all the mechanics.
We'll have a day where we go over a lot of mechanic stuff because we love talking about that sort of thing. But like, I guess the most important one is like putting in the work and the focus and the discipline and the commitment to executing pitches and commanding the baseball earlier in my career so I can get those reps in.
Yeah. I mean, something to kind of go off what you said too about like looking in the mirror and being vulnerable about what you need to be good at. Something I see a lot in the players I train is that they'll have a coach who says like this or that about them, and they're like, well, he just doesn't like me. And at the end of the day, in college, my coach said a lot of things to me about things that, and I didn't like it at the time, but every time I've looked back on it, he was right every single time. Like not once did he make a bad point to me. I just wasn't taking in the information well. And if you have a coach who maybe you think you doesn't like you or all this stuff or has it out for you, don't listen to exactly what he's saying. Try and figure out the message behind what he's saying in terms of like, well, I'm just not comfortable with having you out there, or from a hitter's perspective, like you need to stop pulling, like something for me was like, you need to stop pulling everything in BP. Just like, you got to figure out why he's saying something to you. And that could be career altering if you're willing to figure out why. And sometimes you might need to do the work by yourself to figure out why and then make the adjustment by yourself. But never disregard anything any coach says to you completely. Like, you could at least think about it, consider it. Yeah, maybe it is dumb. All right, maybe you have a bad coach. Maybe he gave you a bad idea and it's not going to help you. But don't just brush it off. Consider what he has to say and then say, can I actually get better from this? Is there a way I can improve just a little bit in the area he's talking about to be that player that's more like reliable?
Yeah.
And this is the thing. Most college coaches don't just not like guys, right? There's a reason that they find you to be someone they're not comfortable putting in the lineup, which for me was just because I had so many bad at-bats when I was a freshman, just to bring it to the hitting perspective. But you need to really figure out why and then make those adjustments, because coaches know what a good player is and what a not good player is. They've seen it long enough. So there's probably a reason they're telling you what they are.
It can go both ways as well. Like if you're a guy that's getting opportunity and you kind of feel like you're sucking and you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself, like there's a reason that you're being put into those situations. It's because someone, probably your coach, like really believes in you. And so why does he believe in you? Like you better figure that out, because if someone else can see it, you better be able to see it for yourself.
Yeah. That's a really good point.
Like I'm not doing well right now, but he or whoever this person is believes in me enough to give me these opportunities. So like, let me recognize that as well and use that as a strength.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. 100%. Last thing I want to talk about is why we started Lightning Lab.
Great.
So
yeah,
obviously we've started Lightning Lab. We're training guys together. Just a quick overview of that. If you work with Lightning Lab, you're working with Kyle and I, not just one or the other. We provide your training, throwing, mental skills work, anything you want to ask us. We want it to be seen like we're your older brothers. And that's kind of how I saw you for a while when we were training, where you helped me with any question I would have. And obviously I've had players that I've worked with that I feel like I'm their almost an older brother figure to them. We don't want it to be like a coach that you don't want to bother to text. It's like, no, if you need to talk to us, we're here. If there's anything we could help you with, even if you feel it's not baseball related, at the end of the day, everything in life connects to your performance on the field. It's not just baseball. So we want to be here to actually help players in any possible way they could kind of imagine, where it's not like they have a coach, but they have that big brother type figure that can really guide them through the training process. And again, we've definitely started to figure out what we think are the best ways to do it, just because we've done things wrong so many times. And I mean, you don't learn without doing things wrong. So I think one of the best things we're able to do for guys is like help them avoid those year-long rabbit holes that are a waste of your time almost, because I've been down them.
Let's make those failures. They're going to happen and they should happen, but let's make them more efficient and make adjustments, a little quicker than maybe we would like to at sometimes.
Correct. And I mean, we've seen the way we could help guys, and I love helping guys. It's just something that I feel really good about. Even when I was in college, I was always the guy like hitting with all the younger guys, all that stuff. It just felt good to me, almost to a point where it was a detriment to me, because I was so focused on helping all these other guys. I wasn't even helping myself enough at some points in my career. But yeah, I think we just really care about the guys we work with on a different level, and we've done it. We've turned ourselves into athletes. I mean, I was a slow, unathletic high school baseball player that couldn't hit. Legit loser, honestly. And you see us now.
So you're not a dork now?
Not a dork now, I'd like to think. But you see us now, and we've worked hard, and you might think we've just had this our whole life, but like I certainly didn't, and I know you've completely transformed yourself too. And I mean, it's a long process, but we can help you guys streamline that. So it's really exciting for us to help you guys out in that regard.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. You know, we want to help you guys any way we can. We have a lot of knowledge. We're going to continue to keep learning and growing as well. But we would love to help other people and players kind of progress through their journey in a way that we wish we kind of had. You know, just a support system, a knowledge base, a resource in any way, shape, or form that we can be. You know, we love talking baseball. We love talking mechanics, pitching, training, like whatever it is. Like you know, we'll chat about it with you, and that's what we love to talk about. So
for sure.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the end of episode 1 of the Lightning Lab
How
podcast.
long was it? Let's see.
How long?
A little less than an hour. Pretty good.
All right. Hopefully you guys learned something today, or learned a little bit more about us. So we're going to have some different guests on. Sometimes it might just be Kyle or myself hosting, but we want to get a bunch of guys on. So yeah, good stuff.
Good job.